I have some fun things for us to deal with because, as you remember, uh, the the community of Headwater has been invaded effectively, and we have a bit of a controversy, or at least differing claims or opinions about our friend Zort.
Mm-hmm.
And so, at last examination, um, the newcomer, whose name is has laid claim to Zort as effectively uh, the problem of the cult of the Merciful Dawn. They would like to deal with their problem. Um, it is a little strange if that's the only reason. You know that there has been a great deal of um, open conflict in the West, where you came from. You know that the Merciful Dawn has played a very military role in these conflicts. And you also might wonder why they would care so much about one little layman member of the cult. Um, Certain details might be relevant. Jovan was a powerful participant, or at least a significant participant, in the different high status claims to power in that region. And also, Zort has not been separate from some of the most important magical events that have led to these, the whole situation. So
Yeah.
that means that maybe he's a little bit more important than he looks, but you don't know the details from this cult's point of view. Not yet. Those are just some of the things that you do know that I thought you would like to have reviewed. Now, let's not forget that the enormous giant statue is still a major feature of the, or is now a major physical feature of this community, and there is no way that anybody would miss it or not notice it. And so, just to remind you of the visual presence of this thing, that the woods in the middle of the community are now very obviously extensive and magical, that they are no longer just a few little fruit trees in rows. They are now, you know, a, a representative of the wilderness in general. And so this, if you were to come here 3 or 4 months ago, the whole place would be interesting, but it would look like this map. Well, it doesn't really look like that map entirely anymore. It has a much more extensive and strange uh, identity now. And the let's see, at last encounter, people had set up their living situation across the river, and there is to be a relatively peaceful discussion among those with community power. Um, and I I will also, and Helma has described to me how Skava has prepared for this meeting. Um, and so we should probably move to that. I do want to do one small thing, um, which has to do with what Jala has learned. She told you a lot about the skull, right? Hold on just one moment, Helmet. Urko, or rather Sandra, Jala has told Urko a lot, remember, about the skull that you had found,
Yeah.
and also that there was the body that you had found as well in the ruins of the tower that was not the same skull. I mean, that body had its own head. Um, and the important thing is that it looked, that what she has found is that it looked as though uh, something had gone horribly wrong with the body's bones and organs. That it had died, the person had died of some failure of their body uh, to function properly. I mean, the different organ, the bones are twisted and there are growths on them, and it is. She suspects it has something to do with the processes of making the giant because there is no evidence of chaos. Usually, when you see gross and warped things, it's because of chaos. Here, there's something else that caused it. So those are some interesting points. She has decided that the various substances and notes and things that you had collected from that workshop are probably better off put in somewhere very safe and very deep in the giant. Um, there are ways to get around inside the giant, it turns out. It's not just the head. And so she and the people who are now enthusiastic supporters of her cult have decided to kind of create rooms and places to go, based on those passages. So effectively, the giant is turning into kind of an apartment building.
I love this.
Right. So, but in one of those places that Jala has not told anybody about, she has put that stuff from the workshop, and that door is closed. Thank you very much. So,
Jala.
yeah. Well, she has suspicions that a certain member of your group, whom she is, she likes very much, but does not really trust Akindu not to go and dip his fingers into that stuff some more. So she's decided that needs to kind of stay out of lizardly hands.
I don't trust it either. He seems to like to be poking around, so.
Right. Our first consideration now as a group is going to be Skava's entrance with all these women and a few men now who have decided that they are really going to go for this woodswoman business. And before we get your description, I just want to tell you that the egg that you guys had stuck into that forest seems to have solidified and had plants grow over it and is now a somewhat significant looking object. It's no longer just an egg, transparent egg. It's like an oval of solid matter, and the plants have grown on top of it. And
interesting.
Yeah, Sila is convinced that it's doing something.
I think so.
Okay, tell us about yourself.
Just a minute before I go anywhere and do anything else. I would like to make sure with the sword what he wants. Does he want to stay, or does he want to honor what he said to the spirit? Or does he think of a way which would make both possible?
See, the thing is, Sword would really like to stay. It's a nice company. But he also knows that, or rather he thinks, that it would be for the best if he went together with his cult and did the, so to say, right thing.
Yes.
Is everyone attending this meeting, or is it just them?
Well, there will be a group meeting, and for the current conversation, we know that Helma and Zort are talking, and it seems perfectly reasonable that Ikindu could be present. And it also is up to you, Sandra, whether you are participating or not, or whether you are learning about the cool chambers inside the giant now.
Your choice.
Oh, Sandra, you're suffering. Your face is
Yeah.
suffering.
The both. I don't know what to do.
One thing first, then the other.
Okay, so since Sort didn't want me to fight, I will investigate the giant.
Okay. So
I'd like to have Ikindu close to me because I may need him. I have the embryo of a pretty desperate idea to solve Sort's problem.
Okay. So the excellent. So the three of you are currently in a bit of a conference, and I'd like to place this in that building, which is next to. There are several actually, but one of the buildings which is next to that grove of trees, and which is now effectively kind of Skava's headquarters, and you are perhaps getting ready. In the appearance that you described to me in the email, you are getting ready with all of the activities as you are talking to the two of them. Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Completely fine. Talk first?
Yeah.
Preparations first? Talk first. I have this idea basically, Sort, when we met, Jovan was your master, right?
Yeah, he had gotten. I was serving him to the extension of the cult.
That's some kind of business contract?
You could say that. Yeah. So he sponsors the cult, and the cult sends me. And, well, he didn't make it, so.
But that definitely wasn't your fault. What I'm thinking is if we can find out if we have anything they want, I need somebody who protects me, who helps me. Could we try to make me Sort's mistress? What do you think he can do?
You mean to sponsor my cult?
If we can find out if there's anything they want that we could give them. I mean, I really don't know much about business and the value of things, but you know, right?
Yeah. I'm not really that knowledgeable about what was your cult called again?
The Merciful Dawn.
Right.
The Merciful Dawn.
Yeah, the Merciful Dawn is well known where you're from. This is a sort of community service by which people who are affected by chaos, who are born chaotic, right? They are provided with housing and training and education and suitable functions in society, and that's usually done through a contractual arrangement with the temple. The cult itself also, so at that level, it's sort of the general populace or community level. It's basically a kind of a serviceable, it provides this service, and it houses people who might be dangerous. It also, in its progression into initiate status, channels and controls the power of chaos in a way that's symbolized by chains. So the initiates wear these chains. The idea is that the chaos is kept chained. And the militant or the military side of it can be very, very formidable, because you now have these sort of monstrous chaos-touched fighters who are operating as a trained unit. And so the temple turns out at that level to be a much more powerful political force than it looks when you first encounter it.
Okay. Do they rent out these mercenaries, or?
Well, it's a little bit less monetary than that. It's a little bit more in terms of what the temple supports. I mean, they would say that they're at the service of, society, but they are making the decision about who is going to have a considerable amount of the power in some kind of conflict. That's why you've heard from the West that the cult has become militarily active and has been participating in a number of armed conflicts scattered across the whole West Coast.
Okay.
Ever since the events that destabilized